Can everybody hear me? Yeah. All right, perfect. Well, thank you everybody for coming out again tonight. It's really supporters like you that really made this thing, the effort that we've seen really work. And we're going to need your support. This is going to be a long battle, and we've got a lot of resources ahead, and we've got a lot of people here to kind of update you on what's going on tonight. So, few things. First off, that again, you guys are our number one supporters, and thank you. Another one, in environmental defenders. They've done a lot of behind-the-scenes work and research on this project, and really supplied us with a lot of detailed information. So, really big thank you to the environmental defenders in McHenry County, and we're going to be sure to support them after this thing's killed. Another one is Kill Skinner, McHenry County blog. He's done a great job. What's going on and giving a behind-the-scenes look. So we really want to visit McHenry County blog. I can tell you I'm on there probably 3-4 times a day looking for updates, and Kel's done a great job. So, and by the way, I'm Chris Writing, kind of. I have a great team of other people helping me, and everybody else that's offered support and sent me links. If I don't answer it, I am trying to work a full-time job on top of it, but we do see the information that you're sending us, very valuable to us, and make sure that you keep sending it, because we're all looking at it. So another thing we're going to announce today, and you may have saw the newspaper ad with our current GMC and Buick in Barrington. They ran a full-page ad in the Northwest Herald opposing the plan. We're going to, starting on the 15th, we're going to have a brand new fundraiser with them. It's going to be three-tiered social media campaign. Drive for 50, and we're going to get money for just liking their page and supporting them in other ways. Details will be available soon, but really big thank you to them, and for them to step up and help us out. So let's support the people that support us. So thank you, and I'm going to pass it off to Ryan, and he's got some financial updates and things like that.
Ryan Newman. I am here to do two things. One is give everybody an update on our money. Can you hear me in the back? Move forward. Hello? There we go. All right. So I'm going to provide a financial update. You guys will let me soapbox for just 1 minute. You know, I want to quickly tell you what it feels like being up here. A lot of people talk a lot about what's great about this country and our communities, and what makes this country great is actually what we're all doing right now. Everybody in here, it's not just the people that are sitting up here. If you're in this room, that means you've lost just as much sleep as we have, and you've had the anxiety that's been driving us to make do what we're doing. And I just again want to thank all of you, because being in this room, checking the Facebook page like I know more than half of you are doing on a regular basis, that all helps. That's active participation, and that's the kind of stuff that we need to make our community a better place. So thank you. In line with that, I want to thank some people specifically. If you remember, some of you may and some of you may not, there was an article in the Herald where Trustee Smith made a statement early on that the opposition was coming mostly from outside of Oakwood Hills. Support was coming from outside. So, and this will tell you kind of how this team formed. You know, we all found these reasons to sort of engage and contribute. And mine was, I can't believe that that guy thinks this is true. So I immediately started reaching out through our email list to ask for volunteers to be street captains. And a group of people, I think I have all their names here, if I don't, please forgive me, stepped forward, and I don't know if you remember the humidity wave we had. It was that week of just wet air, hot, sticky, that these folks were walking door to door. Most of you probably saw them, and it's not easy. They're getting hit by people that wonder why they're out there. It's bad. It's not easy for this job. So I want to thank these people, and I want to rattle up all the names. When I call your name, and if you participated and I don't call your name, I'd like you to stand up, and if you're in the back, please step forward and be recognized. In no particular order: Linda Davis, Jeannie Cantrell, Rosie and Mike Riley, Joyce Malik, Rebecca McCarthy, Sue Hayden, Carla and Mark Hamilton, Jack Klepper, Kaylee Smith, Dory Beige, Sarah Sanholm, Christina Mendez, Barb Kaminsky, Rosemary Berg, Mark Bonhoff, Chris Waite, Kathy Mayman, Bob A., Amy Wagner. So thank you. We'll present the results of the effort before we leave tonight. The next agenda item that I have is the finances. I can only imagine, what it's like to write a check to a bunch of people that you don't know to support a cause that probably, at most times, we don't fully understand. So, the only thing more important than the money, and I hate saying this, but it's true, the only thing more important than the money is all of you sitting here tonight. But second to that, unfortunately, is the money. As you've seen, as you know, he'll speak later tonight, we've hired Steve Kuda to represent us. He's already done a great job. Thank you for the work you've done. You'll hear more about that in a bit. I will be specific. I need to get into the specifics of numbers. And I urge you, if you want to ask questions and challenge, there's no offense taken. Like I said, we have full-time jobs. So if you have questions about the money, go ahead. We've grossed $24,325. We initially wrote a check to our attorney for $5,000 on retainer. We've commissioned an engineering firm, $2,500 for a report, which you have not seen yet, but will. We spent $1,650 on signs that most of you have seen. And a lot of money that we recovered from that is part of why the grossed up the big number, the $24,000. We spent $400 on printing and miscellaneous. And we're tonight we're going to write a check to Mr. Kuda for the other $5,000. We have $8,000 in the bank with the goal of that funding us until at least through the trustee meetings. I can ask some, are we talking about the process? Who's talking about the process as to what to expect? So you'll hear a lot more of what that means, but we're looking to be funded through the trustee meetings, which means ultimately the vote. So $8,000 is what we have to go on from now till then. It's hard to predict where we're going to be. We expect more than one meeting per phase. We're in the zoning board hearing phase. We need to get through that, and then ultimately the trustee meeting phase. Each one of those phases, and we'll get some clarification, could result in multiple meetings, and we may need to hire additional expert witnesses. So thank you for the money, and it's going to good use, and it's needed. And we do have tonight a stand on the way out the door that some of the ladies, I think, have made red ribbons. It was asking for $1 or whatever you can spare. Any questions on the money? Oh, I forgot. I do want to, sorry. I'm not going to lie to you. I skipped over this one on purpose. $1,700 we did pay to GoFundMe. It's one of those costs, it's just a matter of doing business. We're trying to crowdsource like we were through the internet. They charge us 7.9% on the donation and 30 cents per donation to collect. So if you do want to donate and you really want to avoid the internet fees, you can write a check to me. I hold the money anyway, Brian Noonan, or you can, we set up an account at Mr. Kuda's office, and we can provide information for you to provide money directly to Steve Kuda. Any questions? Okay.
Next up, please, Prairie Grove. All right, can everybody hear me? Yeah. They talk better with a whistle and also as a coach. But I want to thank everybody for coming out. I want to thank all the support we've had from the very beginning. And I want to thank the little junior Wolves up here, my football team in the front row. We always preach hard being a good team is being a good teammate. And thanks for being a good teammate right now in the community. So I appreciate it. Like I said, my name is Brett Braithwaite. I do not live in Oakwood Hills. I live in Royal Oakwood Estates, right across the street. And way back in the beginning, we all kind of vowed that we're all Oakwood Hills people from the very beginning. We'll fight with you guys to the very end. Give you a little background, and I kind of said it in my hearing speech. I likened the day that we all found out we were getting a power plant to be in a small little country, say like Sweden, friendly, nice people, and you get delivered a message, and the message says you're about to be invaded in 8 days. You better build an army, and you better get your weapons. Unfortunately, we didn't have an army, and we didn't have any weapons like information. So probably about 4, 5, 6, there were more behind the scenes that we didn't know at the time. Just kind of started to scramble around to figure out what can I do to help the situation. So everybody did different things. One guy started Facebook, next guy does this. I happen to have some contacts in the political world, so I kind of took that on and started to reach out to as many local politicians as I can. I kind of put up a grid and said, we want to attack this thing locally, we want to attack this thing on the county level, and we got to do it on the state level. So I kind of started there and started to reach out. And I found that there were different ways that people were going to handle this in the political arena. I ran across some people, and they were all very nice, politicians that didn't necessarily, they were willing to give information, but they didn't necessarily want to come out publicly and take a stance at that point. And that's fine, because we were in the information gathering phase. Then I found some people that had no problems picking sides. His name was Joe Gottemauer. When I called the county office, I found out that he was the attorney for the other side. So he had no problem choosing where his allegiance was. I hope we all keep that in mind down the road. In addition to that, I found some people on the outskirts. There were, fringe helpers, as I call them. I reached out to Mike Tryon. Although this is not his area, he was extremely helpful in feeding us information, feeding us contacts of politicians like David McSweeney and Dan Duffy. That he was really my main source in avenues that I was going to take in trying to get this out through the political world on every level. So I don't think he's here, but Mike Tryon, if this ever gets back to you, thank you. He's got a wealth of information for us. Another one's Pam Altoff. Pam, again, is not directly in our area, but every time we were going into a heated meeting, I would call her and say, hey, how do we want to approach this thing? Is it pitchforks and torches, or is it, analytical information, or what is it? And she's been very helpful. So I want to make sure we remember that as well. Another one is the mayor of Crystal Lake. Behind the scenes, although he has not come out publicly, he has been very informative to me on how meetings work. And he was the one that told me, you all remember the hearing night when they came out spewing that they had the gray water, I knew that day they didn't have the gray water, and he explained to me that speaking to staff means nothing more than speaking to staff, and you're speaking to staff, so then I guess I had to deal with them too to not do it. So he's been very helpful in getting us that information to our group to not panic. There were no deals set or anything like that. So To those guys, thank you. There were 4 people that I want to talk about tonight that not only climbed the tree to help us out, but they actually jumped out on a limb. And by that I mean they took a very early public stance against this power plant. And the first 2 I want to bring up are their county board members. And one of them, Donna, just walked in, and she came out, Donna Cruz and Mr. Michael Walko were the first ones to come out in the paper in opposition of this power plant, recognized very early that this is not a good fit for us, and it shouldn't be in this area. And although I didn't deal a lot with Donna, Ryan did, and as Ryan put it eloquently last night, she was the guiding light in our dark cave as we got through this whole process. The information she provided to us has been invaluable. So we owe her a huge thanks. She's going to get up and talk. On the heels of those 2 coming out and feeling like they got a little bit of steam, finally someone locally, all of us were asking the same questions behind the scene. How can this be happening here? Why isn't anybody listening to us? This is absurd that this thing is going in here. And they finally came out, got the press kind of thinking and saying, hey, maybe there's something more to the story, because the only information they were probably getting was the power plant information. So right on the heels of that, I got a text from Mike Tryon, and it was the contact information for Senator Dan Duffy and David McSweeney. And right after that, basically I had spoken to, or I left a message for both of them. Within that day, they both had called me back. I expressed my concerns. They were going to gather some information. They did just that. It didn't take too long after that for them to come out publicly in the newspapers and basically say, hey, this is not the right thing here. There's something else, going on. That was when I felt like we picked up steam. I felt that there was a little more jump in everybody's step around town. Like, hey, now we've got the attention of some people that might be able to do something on a big scale. So that was extremely huge. So I want to thank those 2. Then I went one step further. David, basically, as you all know, they tried to make it like we were a bunch of thugs and there were violent threats and all that garbage. David is the first one to come out and say, hey, listen, there's no proof of any threats, and there's absolutely no reason why they should be closing that office. And he's the one who basically contacted the Attorney General's office and got that opened up for the village of Oakwood. So before I bring up David, I want to kind of real quickly say I've been as guilty as everybody when it comes to local politics. Okay, we all seem to just feel like it's going to be taken care of. We don't go out and vote. We don't pay attention to any of this stuff. This has been a huge eye-opener to me. So it would make me proud, everybody in this area proud, if we got active in local politics so something like this doesn't sneak up and bite us. And let's remember the people that have supported us and get out and support them. And let's also remember the people that maybe didn't, and let's eliminate them. I want to bring up So without further ado, everybody give a warm welcome to our community hero, Mr. David McSweeney.
Very good to be here with my constituents, my peaceful constituents who are exercising their God-given democratic rights. I will applaud everybody in this room for being here tonight and for standing up for what is right. Let me tell you how I got involved in this whole situation, now that you're my constituents. I am a supporter of natural gas power plants when they are in the right location. The problem with this power plant, as everybody knows in this room, is with 100 yards of school property. The water usage is absolutely not planned for, and it is a disaster for our community. So Senator Duffy and I got together and we said, this is wrong. We need to stand up for our constituents. And we came out for this. And I'm not going to just be there at the end. I promise you that I will be here throughout the entire process. This has to, God forbid, if this is approved by the Village of Oakwood Hills, this will have to go down IEPF, and we will fight this all the way to the end. This is not the way. It was also wrong for the village president to make accusations that tarred an entire community. When I heard that they were shutting down the village hall, I called the state's attorney. I called the assistant state's attorney. I said, if anybody has made threats, they should be arrested. Are there any records of this? There were Freedom of Information Act requests. I spoke with the state's attorney. I spoke with the assistant state's attorney. I spoke with the people who were involved in the FOIA request. There is absolutely no documentation. We do not live in a police state. We live in a democracy. And that's why I went to the Attorney General, and I will give her credit. She followed up. She had her staff follow up, and within a week and a half, we had a letter directing the village to open up. You are paying your tax dollars for the village to operate. They shut down. There is no documentation. They have carded you as citizens. That is what your leaders have done. I am disgusted by that, and that is why I am very proud that the Attorney General opened up that office again, and it's going to stay open. What I know that I've discussed it, and it turns out your attorney did a good job. There's been a violation of the Open Meetings Act. Turned out they've been discussing this for over a year in violation of the state law. But guess what? As usual in Illinois, the state law is broken. Because what it says is that you only can, as a citizen, take action if it's within 60 days of the meeting. Well, as we all know, they covered it up. Now only the state's attorney make a change. So I am going to be proposing legislation that says anytime that it becomes public, anytime there's a cover-up, that citizens will always have the right within 60 days to press for action. This is a fight for your community. This is a fight for my constituents. It is very, very clear that you do not want this power plant. You do not want it. There are very few people who will go on record as wanting it. And that's why it's so important in a night like this that you keep a peaceful, democratic demonstration of what the people of this community thought. There's a petition, there are surveys, there are signs. And don't give up and think. There was something on the Facebook page today that said that all the village board members are closed. We know where the village president is. We know where she is, and she's wrong. However, this is the time to actually, as citizens, lobby those village board members and make sure in a peaceful and positive way they know where things stand. It is clear that this is the wrong location, this is the wrong project, and I will be there to fight with you to the end, I promise you. By saying that I'm very proud you're all here tonight, and I'm also going to give a contribution. It's not my personal money, I'll give you $100, and God bless you all.
Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Great. First off, I didn't have a red suit, or I would have worn it. I did come to the first meeting, and my stepdaughter and I both wore red. And we didn't even realize it was the color of the day. So, you know, I want to reinforce something that Representative McSweeney said, and that is that every one of you in this room has made has made us proud. And the reason we're so proud of what you've done is you've stood together as a community, and you stood up for each other. You've done it in a peaceful way. You've done it in a very intelligent way with the tremendous leadership of the gentlemen that are up here tonight. And you also are leaders in our county because of what you are doing. You are protecting our county. And I am stating something that many people in the county understand, many people in county government, though not all. But I will point out a few people in our county government that totally get it. And they're going to stand with you. Our chairman of the board was not able to be here tonight, but she told me that she wanted you to know, Tina Hill, that she will be standing with you. I also have Mary McClellan, who's our county board member. Soon to be our county clerk, and that'll happen after November. Michael Walko. And I believe Michael is going to have a few comments to make as well. Michael and I were very just ecstatic in the leadership that Representative McSweeney has shown. And the important thing is that your message, the strength of courage, your principled stance, isn't affecting just McHenry County. I do want to mention, I was just at a very large political meeting just before this, and I said, I have to leave shortly. And they said, oh, you go to the Oakwood Hills meeting? Everybody knew about your meeting. Everybody has heard your voice. And people outside of McHenry County know about you too. I have had people who live on the far side, the far south side of Chicago, and they've said, oh, what do you know about that Oakwood Hills community? Boy, they are something else. The point is, you're making a big impact. You're protecting your community. You're protecting your property values. Most importantly, you're protecting your families. But you're also making a difference by setting the example of courage and of leadership in your community, and for something that I feel very heartfelt about, and that is protecting our groundwater for the next 50 or 100 years to come. So in conclusion, I want to say that you've inspired me beyond what I ever thought possible. And I'm even more inspired right now to work hard for you, to do everything I can. And that means having some very, very direct conversations with our county board. I know that Mary McClellan and Michael Walko are going to help me in that. And again, thank you very, very much for what you are doing, because you are the true leaders. Thank you.
Did you want to make a couple more? I wouldn't go ahead from here and say anything. I would have worn red, but black is more slimming. I do represent this district, as is Mary McClellan, third district, which is all of Liberty Township, and moves to the northern part of Algonquin Township and the southern part of McHenry Township. And during the primary and the general election, I kind of adopted Oakwood Hills. I think I run every single doorbell in Oakwood Hills at least 3 times. But a lot of you weren't home, okay? I kept coming back, and then you still weren't home, and I just had, remember that kind of piece of literature. So I hope you read them, and thank you for your support. I did really well.
I looked at the, I watched a little bit of the video at the college meeting, and I was very impressed, in particular, by the stirring comments that were made by Mrs. Louise. I don't know if Bernie said anything, but I didn't watch the whole thing, but the two of them have really been in love with those for a long time. In fact, we founded the place, and they've been very active, and I'm really glad to see that they're both on board. In addition to being county board member, I actually have to be a lawyer. And I was on the planning commission for the county for 8 years. So I was on the county board. I was on the planning commission. One of the issues that we dealt with a lot of the planning commission is the question of what exactly is it that the county can do. And I think people should be clear on what the county can and cannot do in this situation. This is a land use decision, and because of an arcane, really medieval-based legal system that we have, it really goes back to the Middle Ages when you have this little hamlet, and so nobody cared if the butcher and baker or the candlestick maker, put an addition on their shop. And so the cities were given complete authority over everything in their jurisdiction that involves land. And that is carried over to the modern age where it really doesn't have applicability anymore because things happen inside municipalities that have impacts beyond the municipality. And the arguments with people on the county board about this, we can't do anything because this is a municipal issue, it's a land use issue, we can't do anything about it. But we can do some things. We do have jurisdiction in a couple of areas, and I have to be on both of the committees that do this. One would be the Public Health and Resources Committee chairs, and we do have jurisdiction to look into health issues, particularly issues that say will relate to air pollution. So we're going to try to have some type of a hearing on this at one of our upcoming meetings before we have the vote here. We haven't had so far, we're trying to have a bunch of people who've been able to meet and quorum, so we're able to do it. I think we do plan on doing that. The other committee I'm on is called the Natural Environment and Resources Committee, and we have jurisdiction over the issue of water. And this is going to impact the water. And so we do have the ability to look into how it's going to impact the water usage for those people who are in unincorporated areas who have wells. Those people are going into depression if you take too much water out of one area and pulls the water out of the other areas and you wind up having to dig a well. So we do have the ability to look into that. I do not chair that committee. It's chaired by Michelle Adang, Greenwood, and so people here, if they want us to table something, I've asked them to take it up in one of our future meetings. They should call Michelle Adang, A-A-D-A-N-G, and ask that she schedule something for the Natural Environment and Resource, we call it NERC committee, to discuss the water impact. I can't do that. I'm not sure of that. If we get some pressure from people, then we may get some action in that area as well. So anyway, we should play the best of luck, and we're with you on this one.
Well, folks, those of you who don't know me, my name is Joe Rishardi. The reason why I'm here tonight is because of the names that are in this envelope, okay? This represents our community. Once again, kudos to our street captains who visited every single rooftop in Oakwood Hills over the previous 3 weeks. And they talked to a lot of people. They talked to 882 people exactly. And you know something? There is some support for this power plant. There were 7 people in your community who are in support of this power plant, and I do respect their opinion. There were a handful of folks, about 40, 45 people, who really hadn't made the decision yet, and there were some folks that just didn't want to speak, which I respect. But there were 895 of that 882 that were. So I only have one thing to say to this home. You were wrong. first came about, I was fortunate enough to very early in the process hook up with Ryan and Chris, Brett, and from the very beginning I told them, like, look, this is not going to, we take this on, it's not going to be a boxing match, it's not going to be a friendly fight. At the end, we're not going to raise someone's hand and shake hands and walk away with friends. This is going to be a street fight. If we do this, somebody's going down. And that's exactly how we approached this. At that point, we decided there was no way we could fight this fight without legal representation. If we were going to do it right, we were going to find someone that would help us to craft our case and put our best arguments forward. So we started a due diligence process and interviewed, I can't tell you how many attorneys. There's a very short list of attorneys after we did that process that we really wanted on our side. And it's with great pleasure that I have the opportunity tonight to introduce Mr. Stephen Kuda. Steve took the case. Steve has a lot of knowledge about the local area. He was the mayor of McHenry. He was successful in fighting INDEC back in 1999 when they tried to do the similar scheme for the residents of Woodstock. So we're happy to have We've asked Steve to come here tonight to just kind of give you guys an idea of what the process we feel is going to look like going forward. What we're not going to try to do tonight is to try this case amongst ourselves. There's a limited amount of information that Steve can give you, but he's going to be here. He's going to give you a rundown of the process. Perhaps we can take a few questions, but we don't want to turn this into a 3 or 4 hour ordeal. You'll very shortly get the opportunity to hear our case, and I think you'll be very happy with the investment we've made in Mr. Steve Kuda.
I was contacted by Joe probably the middle of July, and he gave me a rundown on where the village was in the process, and mentioned a host agreement that the village had recently entered into with the venture and power company. And I was really surprised to hear that the village had gone to that extent and asked Joe to get all the information to me. So we took a look at the host agreement, and then I told Joe I really wanted to take a look at the minutes from the previous board meetings to see how long the mayor had been in the discussion phase with the village. Well, lo and behold, when we looked at the minutes that were posted on the village website, there was only one meeting where the host agreement was discussed, and that was the night that the village trustees voted in favor of it. Now, that just seems really, really odd when we're talking about a $450 million project that was going to supposedly generate millions of dollars to the village of Oakwood Hills. So we told Joe, I said, we really need to investigate a little bit further. Let's file a freedom of information request. I put one together. Joe personally delivered it to the village of Oakwood Hills. Oakwood Hills had, I believe, 7 business days. It's in the statute amount of time to turn over the information to us. Missed the deadline because they were closed, but they eventually did get that to us. One of the interesting comments that was made was that we asked for the actual petition, the full petition that had been filed by Northland with the village of Oakwood Hills. We were initially told that that was not a document that could be turned over. It was not a public document because the village hadn't voted on the petition. Immediately contacted the village attorney, and he said, I already know about the problem, Steve. You will have, tell your client you can get over to Village Hall and we'll be ready for him immediately. So we did that. But what was really interesting, when we did get the results from our freedom of information request, we found out that the village did discuss this host agreement and the proposed power plant in closed session about a year ago. It was a clear violation of the Open Meetings Act. That information has been turned over to the state attorney's office. I have no idea what they'll do with it, but thanks to the Northwest Herald, I believe we really put notice, gave notice to the village officials of Oakwood Hills that that type of conduct will no longer be tolerated. The folks who live in Oakwood Hills, the folks that live in the area of Oakwood Hills, are entitled to know exactly what the village officials are discussing. I've had several comments made to me
one including the village attorney who just expressed real amazement that the folks in Oakwood Hills were so upset with this proposed power plant. And I explained to him, I said, well, maybe no one really would have been that upset had the village taken the time to post this information on their website. It's really interesting, if you have a lifeguard that somehow retires or quits at a local beach, that makes the news in Oakwood Hills. That's posted on the webpage. But a proposed $450 million power plant is suddenly lost. And I don't think that's going to happen anymore. So that was really the first big project we worked on. Now we're gearing up for the next zoning hearing. I anticipate that the petitioner is going to come in and really try to clean up what I feel was a disaster of an initial hearing on July 24th. We obtained the transcript of that hearing. We've gone over it. I've gone over it. Joe has, several of us with a fine-tooth comb. And as a result of the review of that transcript, we're all convinced that if the village applies the standards that it has in its ordinances or conditional use or variance, that there's no way this is going to pass. But that's still up to the zoning board. They have to vote on this. We feel that at the next meeting, Northland will bring in more testimony. We'll respond to that. Eventually, the matter will go to the village board. I don't know if it's going to be one zoning board meeting, 2 zoning board meetings, or 3 zoning board meetings. But we are prepared to attend every one of those meetings. The other thing we're going to do, we are insisting that the village follow its own ordinance when it comes to the procedure. I don't know if any of you have had the opportunity to take a look at the village of Oakwood Hills website, but it keeps on talking about how at the next hearing there'll be public comment. They completely ignore their own procedure that says that after the petitioner is done with its case, any objectors have the right to ask any questions they feel are appropriate of any of the petitioner's witnesses. Somehow, that was just forgotten on July 24th. So we are insisting that the zoning board of appeals and the chairman take a look at its own ordinance, their own ordinance, and they follow that procedure to the letter. And we feel that by asking pertinent questions to the witnesses that appear on behalf of Northland, that they will prove to the zoning board that this is just a completely inappropriate proposed use for Oakwood Hills. We will then take the matter to the village board, make arguments to them, and I'm certain that the board or that the community, the objectors will be successful. We will be filing a written objection to the petition. That will be filed sometime in October. If appropriate, if the zoning board allows us to do this, we will also be filing a written closing argument. We want to build a record. We want to have something concrete that the trustees can look at when they vote on this, ultimately when they bring it before them. So that's where we're at. I have to tell you that from my personal perspective, as a former mayor, I was just really appalled when I found in those minutes that Oakwood Hills had discussed this matter in executive session. Those trustees, whether or not they're trustees of a village, school board members, park district members, they conduct business on behalf of all of you. And it's not their business. It's not Melanie Funk's power project. It's Oakwood Hills business. And all of you are entitled to know exactly what's going on. And we will make sure that that happens in the future. Thank you. We have 2 choices. the question is, if the village board broke the law, why can't we stop the project? I guess stop the host agreement that they signed? Well, the host agreement, if they had voted on the host agreement in closed session, that could be voided by the courts. But they did vote on it in open session, so I think it would be extremely difficult to have that vote overturned.
One question is, what would it take for us to be able to financial records of 1 million funds, discover if she received any large deposits, make her explain that? It's criminal records against her, I believe that is the case.
Well, the question is, how would we go about getting Melanie Funk's personal financial records to see if there was anything inappropriate?
Relatives, too.
You know, unfortunately, I don't think this group could do that. I think those types of records are only available through a criminal proceeding that would have to take place in the state attorney's office. And I got to tell you, I'll be honest with all of you, I've had this question come up to me many times. Do I think that there's graft or corruption or kickbacks, anything like that? And you know what? I really don't think so. I was born and raised in McHenry. Other than 2 years when I worked downtown, my whole legal profession has been out here in McHenry County. I served 12 or 13 years on the local school board in McHenry and then 8 years as mayor. And I have never seen any type of payments under any circumstance to any local elected official. I don't think it works that way. I think what happens is the big shot comes to town with this huge proposal and starts talking about spending $450 million, and that for some of us who don't deal with that type of money very often, like I never do in my life, it just becomes really, really something that's important, and I think people kind of lose their common sense. And I think that's what happened here. I think this proposal just seemed so great and so good that your local elected officials really lost sight of what's important to Oakwood. I was talking to someone before the meeting started, and I really believe this. I said, you can have a ton of money, but at the end of the day, sometimes having all that money really doesn't matter. And even if they paid Oakwood Hills $10 million a year, would you still want that power plant here? No. I don't think so. I think the question is if everything fails and the power plant gets built. Well, first of all, I just want to say I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think. But if it did, I think the home value issue is very, very difficult. I think we all feel in our gut that if you built a $450 million power plant within a few hundred feet of our house, the value would go down. Yeah, I'm convinced that's the case. But I think the bigger issue, I think this groundwater is just absolutely critical. I don't care what the petitioner says. Maybe I'm passing judgment too soon, but if any of you really think they're going to cool this plant by using the city of Crystal Lake's wastewater,
No.
it's just ridiculous. They're going to dig a well, and they're going to dig a well for one purpose, I believe, I could be wrong, and that's to cool that power plant, and I think that's what we really have to be concerned about.
I can't tell you folks how much we'd love to sit here and answer every single question you have. Now, I've worked very closely with Steve, and from a legal perspective, I think I know this case as well as he does, although I'm not an attorney. Okay? I will make myself available to speak to anyone and ask any questions, and I will answer everything I can. But this man, although he's worth it, he's very expensive. So, and we're not, like I said earlier, we're not going to try this case amongst ourselves. Okay? Yeah. Any questions that I can't answer, I can get an answer for this guy and get it off to you fairly quickly. Yeah, email me. I'll go ahead and get my email up on the Facebook page and the GoFundMe website. Okay? Thanks.
We have a surprise visitor. We can either have me do my whole speech again, or you can remember how many nice things I said about Senator Dan Duffy. What's your choice?
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I'm late. You know the way it is in politics. We've been running around from event to event tonight. I know you heard from Representative McSweeney, and I know how hard he's been working on this issue. We've been working together every step of the way since the first second we heard about this proposal. We were just as shocked as all we were. And as a lot of you know, I've been a small business owner for 20 years. I never ran for office, maybe ran for student council until I ran for the Senate. So being down in the Senate for the past 6 years, I'm obviously used to working with unreasonable politicians. Mike Madigan, he's unreasonable at times, I would say. Matter of fact, when I first ran for office, I even researched the word politics and discovered that when you break down the word politics, poly means many and tick means blood-sucking insects. So believe me, I am always out for a fight and I'm always out for a good cause. I understand the situation that you're in, and I will do everything within my power down in the Senate to stop this if this ever gets down to that point. Now, I know Representative McSweeney also feels the same in the House, and so for this to pass, if it gets down that far, of course, as you know, it has to pass in the House, then it has to pass in the Senate, and then the governor would have to agree to certain aspects of this if it gets to that point. So I've already been working with my friends from both sides of the aisle, members of the Black Caucus, Latino Caucus, informing them about the situation and how it's a local affair and how it was handled. So I think we're in pretty good shape right now. But I'll be brief. I don't want to reiterate everything everybody else has said. But just please keep one thing in mind. This issue is not over. You definitely have momentum on your side, and it is wonderful. It is absolutely great to have all of you here tonight, to have this many people engaged in this local political situation. I just hope that you all stay engaged till the end. Because a lot of times some of these politicians will try to ride you out and see how long people will pay attention to this issue. Try diversions and distractions and all other types of things, maneuvers and tactics that I've seen since I've been in politics. So please, if you remember anything else, please stay engaged. Let's try to follow this through to the end, make the people who initiated this proposal be held accountable for their actions, but most importantly, stop this before it goes any further. Now, anyone, I know I've received a lot of emails from people already, but feel free to email me at dan@senatorduffy.com, dan@senatorduffy.com. Also, you can go to my Facebook page where I talk about this issue a lot, and we'll continue to communicate. I'll continue to do everything I can on the state level down in Springfield. I'll also help you here on the local level any way that I can, and hopefully we'll try to end this bad situation as soon as possible. So thank you very much.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Chris Christensen. As I sit around here looking at the bathroom in Prairie Grove, we started at a bowling alley, right? A bowling alley with 100 people. And so we thank a lot of people, but I think Ryan Noonan, Chris Reining, and Mike Riley should really get a standing ovation for everything they've done to start out. At the very beginning, it became very clear that to fight this power plant, we were going to have to try to find an expert. After calling all over across the country, I was able to find one that actually was very local. Right now, the list of credentials. He has a Bachelor of Science degree in nuclear engineering from Purdue University, a Master of Science degree in nuclear engineering from Northwestern University. Mr. Oakwood worked for ComEd as a nuclear engineer after a period of research at Aragon National Laboratory. He served in the U.S. Naval Reserve from 1981 to 1983. He also served in the U.S. Department of Energy. He served in the California Energy Commission Committee. He is currently the president of CEO at RGA Labs. So we actually have a real expert. So he will tell you about the power plant and after on the move.
Stephen, I'm also a former mayor. I've lived in McHenry County since 1967. I was a mayor over in Barrington Hills for 8 years, on the board for another 4. I appreciate those who have served. All the elected officials that are here, it's an interesting job. I will tell you that we were hired to look at this facility, and we were very clear that we were not going to come in as an objective. That if we were to look at it, we were to look at it as an objective analysis, and if the analysis indicated that there were no impacts and that it was good for the community, we did. And they agreed. However, after looking at it, and we took a very serious look at it, we found 13 different impacts of very much significance. I would not live next to this facility. I wouldn't want to have my family living next to this facility. And I was actually surprised that the developer, Venture in Northland, and they have some experience in building this facility. So my personal perspective as an engineer is that they should know that. I was surprised at the level of impact of this facility. I think it's a 435 megawatt facility, and to give you guys an idea of what that is. That's about 1/4 the size of a nuclear power station like Byron, Braidwood, Zion, which is now shut down. So this is a big facility. This is not, you've seen some of these small peaker plants around the area. There's one over in East ND. Those are substantially smaller than what this facility actually is. We did look at it, and let me just list off the communities that we found impacts to, and then I'll go through the impacts one by one to give you a quick idea of what each one of these things is. The impact radius is about out to 6 miles. That's a circumference. Radius on the circle. That's Oakwood Hills, Crystal Lake, Cary, Fort Barrington, Lakewood, Prairie Grove, Island Lake, Prairie Grove, Ridgefield, Bull Valley, McHenry, Lake in the Hills, Lakemore, Wakanda, and associated areas of McHenry County and Lake County. And in the school district space, that includes districts 47, 155, 156, 118, 46, 3, 15, and 26. The report that we have is essentially complete. On a first level basis, we would like to get more information, both from the village and from Adventure and Northland Power on some specifics of the design itself. We think we have a pretty good idea of what the actual design is. Essentially, the way the plant works is they take natural gas and they burn it in a gas turbine, which is sort of a heavy-duty version. If you look on the wing of a big jet, it's kind of a heavy-duty version of that. That exhaust then goes into another burner set, which has more gas injection in it. There's some water injection that goes in. There's a selective catalytic reduction system to help manage some of the emissions. And then that heat then is used to make steam and drive a secondary turbine. In fact, there's actually 2 generators, and the sum of those 2 things makes up the 435 megawatts. A lot of people talk about gas. Well, gas is very clean, and it's very clean fuel, and in comparison to coal, that's probably true. But it is still a fossil fuel. It is a big, big burner. The amount of water that we're burning is being used both for management in the burner section, in the selective catalytic reduction, and also to provide the cooling for the plant itself, essentially returning steam back to water to be reused again, is about 1.5 million gallons per day. And to give you an idea, that's the same size well as Lake in the Hills. So this is a big draw, a very local area. Part of the report that we did addresses what the geology actually is under this particular area as we know it. And I think one of the things that is also important to understand is that while in the last 20 years we have a lot of science about how the ground structures and the aquifers work, both the so-called shallow aquifers, which those of you who have residential wells are probably poured into, as well as the deep aquifers, which there are some municipal wells that also pour into that. There's a lot of information about them. But we don't know them to a very precise science. And part of the reason is because the only real way that we know them is through what's called well logging. Essentially, the way well logging works is you drill a 9-inch hole in the ground, and as the drill bit bores through the ground, you recover the material that's coming out and you log it. And so the well drillers over the last 100 years have been very good at keeping very good records. And in this area, we have well logs of about 50,000 wells. And from that, we've created these three-dimensional maps. And when I say we, I mean not just my own company, but a lot of work has been done by the county, by local municipalities, by the state geological surveys, the state water survey, as well as the U.S. Geological Survey. And all of that work together has then been used in a variety of different analyses, including people like CMAP. And what those all show is that southeastern McHenry County is particularly vulnerable to overdraw on these aquifers, both the deep and shallow aquifers. And because of that, they are particularly susceptible to contamination. We'll talk about that for a minute. And when we go through I promised Chris that I would not take very long to do this, so I'm going to do this in about 5 or 8 minutes. The first issue is groundwater. This is a chronic impact, meaning that as the well continues to draw, as the plant continues to draw at roughly 1.5 million gallons per day, it will make a larger and larger impact on the area. Some of you have heard the term permanent depression. Essentially what happens is that the strata has a particular resistance through it, and as you draw down on it, the strata cannot feed that well fast enough, and so its level actually drops. In the early 60s, through the early 60s and into just about into the mid-60s, we were drawing so much water in the region out of these aquifers that the level was dropping precipitously and dropped almost 250 feet, which is very, very significant. In the 70s, there was a big effort to reduce the amount of water that's actually drawn through water conservation efforts. Some of them, many of you were created in a way that was ubiquitous to the community. A lot of it was efficiencies by municipalities, but in addition, we also began drawing more and more lake water. So some of the communities, particularly just east of us, now have lake water. That's reduced the loads on these groundwater aquifers. And those aquifer levels have actually returned. They've returned almost 75 feet, which is very significant. So to now turn around and put another demand on these aquifers not only is damaging to the aquifer, but it's damaging to the entire region because it pushes us back in terms of our goals. In addition to the drawdown, it's important to understand that aquifers, they're not like a big sponge. You cannot dry them out and then simply go and re-wet them and then they will recover their capability. Once they've been drawn down, they are damaged forever. And there is no actual recovery. Now, the developer had made a number of claims that says that they want to use gray water, and I use that as well, to mitigate the amount of groundwater. And obviously, anything, any application where you can reduce the amount of groundwater that you're doing is a valuable thing to take a look at. It's important to understand that there is no infrastructure to pipe water from the municipal outlets from either Cary or Crystal Lake to get to this facility, which is here. It's a very substantial piping system that would be required. You have to understand that if municipalities were never designed to deliver this gray water, what they do is they simply outflow it mostly to the river. But there's no storage facility, there's no pumping facility, there's no management of the water in terms of real time, particularly since it's going to be used and be injected back to the atmosphere. One of the problems with gray water is people use this term very loosely. And they make it very sort of innocuous kind of thing. And ultimately, it depends where the source of that gray water actually is. When we talk about gray water, where a lot of this came out of is the work that was done in California. I happen to have been on the California Energy Commission at the time when we worked on this problem. And gray water was originally designed that you could literally have separate plumbing in your house. It would collect water from sinks, showers, essentially non-waste collecting facilities. So it didn't come from the toilet. The problem with the gray water that we're talking about here is that this is actually gray water that is being harvested from black water. So this water has already been contaminated with wastewater. There are no mechanisms that we have in place at the municipal level to be able to manage the pathogen issues and a number of the potential carryovers in terms of contaminants. And there have been a couple of experiments around the country that have done that. Mostly this has to do with something called spray irrigation on septic systems. And the communities that have done that have found that they have had significant outbreaks and contamination associated with this. It has not been a good experience. So the use of gray water for this facility is extremely questionable. There's the issue of icing and fogging and humidity. If you take 1.5 million gallons per day and you spray it up into the atmosphere, particularly in a day like this, you drop the temperature about another 50, 60 degrees, there's no question that you're going to get icing and fogging. And that icing and fogging goes right to road conditions, and it goes to the lake conditions, which we'll talk about in a minute. There's a number of stormwater and aquifer recharge issues associated. This is a 12-acre site. Most of the site will be covered over in one form or another. The real issue here is the potential for stormwater on a 12-acre site to be able to carry over chemicals off-site and wind up in the local recharge. The local recharge, local aquifers here are very, very prolific. And what that means is that if you take a gallon of water, you drop it on the surface. It takes only a few days, a few weeks, in a few cases a few months to actually get into the shallow aquifer. And that means that any contaminant that's in stormwater can easily be transferred into the local aquifers. And that's an issue that is completely undiscussed with the application that we've had so far. Visual and lighting, we found that we're going to be able to see this plant out to about 3¼ miles. To give you an idea of what that means, is that if you stood on Main Street in Cary, you'd be able to see the plant. And the way we know that is that we did a fairly complex gradient analysis. The easiest way is got a big tower out there. It's painted red and white. It's got a big light on it. And you can drive around and see where you can see that light. So if you go over Spring Lake over here, it's going to be very visible. The facility will be about 85% of the height of that tower. So it's a very significant facility. And that's part of the issue associated with the impacts to residential property is the fact that you can see. And this goes also to the issue of lighting. One of the things about McHenry County is that we have a dark background. We have a dark sky at night. Unless you're right in Cary, you're right across the lake. Maybe downtown McHenry. There's not a lot of lighting against the background, and that means that any lighting that is out there is extremely visible. And that will be the problem that you have with this facility. I've seen the artist renderings that the developers put out, that this thing's going to be this sort of very shadowy kind of figure on the night sky. I have spent well over 43 years in power plants. I have never seen a power plant that looks like that.
Yeah.
They're usually pretty well lit. So there's no question that is going to be a there certainly will be noise impacts. Those noise impacts will extend as much as up to 2 miles. One of the issues with noise is power plants tend to operate in fairly low frequencies. That is, the noise that they generate many times tend to be very low frequency. This is a 60 cycle, 120 cycle kind of frequency. And those things have very long transport paths, particularly in the winter. Because in the winter, you don't have any, all the surfaces are hard and reflective. And so that noise can travel very long distances. So anybody that's within 2 miles there will be periods where they need to do atmospheric steam releases, and you will be able to hear those. One of the issues we looked at was air quality. When you're burning gas, for every ton of gas, you need 11.5 tons of air to mix with that gas in order to burn it. And that means that you're pushing a lot of gas, a lot of material through the plant. And we have in the report how many metric tons of CO, CO2, how much total carbon's released, this is a big carbon footprint. The easiest way to figure it is if you took 150,000 cars and you drove them for 11,000 miles on that site 1 year, that's how much emissions the plant will distribute. Take 150,000 cars, drive around 11,000 miles on site over the course of a year, and that is the equivalent emissions that the plant will deliver. We looked at the issue of odors. These plants do have an issue with odor, and if you look in the literature, it is replete with police reports and situations where they've had to do a natural gas purge. If you've ever been around natural gas, there's a captain that they use in the gas so that you can smell it. But there are other odors that come from the plant that have to do with lubricating oil, that have to do with combustion byproducts, and other operations of the plant. One of the issues that many people don't fully appreciate are the radiological issues associated with fossil power plants. Most fossil power plants release more radiation to the environment than nuclear power stations do. And the reason is because in plants like this, where they use water both to help mitigate combustion issues as well as for cooling tower, is that you're pumping it from deep aquifer. And that deep aquifer contains a number of radioactive elements. You're now taking those radioactive elements, which are fine when they're in the ground and they're shielded, even when they're in the lake and they're shielded, and now you're atomizing those, pumping them from the atmosphere, and now you're inhaling those things. And these radiological nucleides, these radionuclides, when they become inhaled, actually become a fairly serious problem. So there's a fairly significant analysis that needs to be done on what the total radiological release is actually going to be. The company will probably tell you that, yeah, you know, we're going to take care of that because we're going to filter out those, which is possible to do. The next problem you have is now you are consolidating those radionuclides on site, and there's a potential of a local release because the interesting thing with engineered systems is that engineered systems tend to fail. And in particular, a company like this just simply does not have a lot of experience in dealing with radionuclide issues. So this is an area that has to be looked at in quite significantly. There'll be a lot of construction traffic associated with that. That construction traffic will be heavy lift. So there'll be very substantial impact on the roadways. I know that they've made comments about going to repair some of these roadways. You know, I built whatever 41 times 12 is of miles of roadway. And I can tell you that no matter how much construction permitting you do and overweight permits you issue and the whole bit, the total cost of the community always far exceeds what the construction project actually does. The last two issues are accidents and fires. We studied accident and fires in some detail, and we call it out as a separate impact issue. The problem with power stations is they are a very high energy machine. And as long as all these energy streams are going in the right direction and they're all coordinated correctly, that works fine. The problem it gets into is when you have an upset. You have a transformer explosion, you have a turbine failure, you have some sort of control system failure, and when a facility like this is out in the middle of nowhere, as it is, say, in that's a manageable issue. When it is right here, just outside the school, it can be a very significant issue. And to give you an idea, I used to be the lead electrical engineer up at Zion Nuclear Station. We had a main power transformer explosion. And we collected parts of that transformer over 1.5 miles away. I had pieces about the size of this lectern here brought back to my office, which came out of a parking lot in a grocery store. So anytime that you have one of these facilities, you have to recognize what its impact is going to be in the engineering field, we call it off-nominal condition, means that there's an explosion requirement. And the last issue I just want to touch on is this issue of zoning creep. And this is really a combination both of engineering and municipal issue. It's very common in a lot of municipalities and counties that for one particular interest, we want to be able to give some sort of zoning variance. In this case, they need to change the zoning, they also need a special use permit associated with this. The problem with that is that has long-term impacts on the health of the community. From the perspective of, if you give this person a zoning variance associated with this plan, or the landowner is, lives right next door, says, oh, I would like the same thing. And what happens is this tends to cascade down. There's actually a whole legal issue associated with it, which Stephen is much better prepared to speak on this than I am. But the issue has to do with the South Act. Anybody that's been a mayor understands the problem associated with this. So the zoning creep issue ultimately leads to industrialization. That's where it all goes. It goes down to industrialization and identity. So with that, those were the basic issues that we found. Bottom line is this is not a particularly good site for this facility. There are a lot better sites associated with it. And there's no question that this site, this project presents quite significant impacts to the community. Thank you very much. When people talk about this issue, they do not reference the CO2 emission. They have a particular, let me just get to the question was that the developer indicated that they were going to have 25 metric tons per year, 25 metric tons per year of volatile organic compound emissions. And the problem with doing this is that they do not account for the, it's in the problem is that they do not account for the total CO2 emission. They also don't, those numbers that they give are also at, the number that they give is also at power. And the unit is expected to release 782,156 metric ton of CO2 per year. And that's recognizing that you're doing, roughly speaking, about 360 grams of CO2 per kilowatt hour. So if you want to get a little serious with the numbers, we can go through that. But there's no question that this is a big impact. And there's now a lot of study about what's called these CO2 domes. What happens if you have a facility like this, it's generating 750,000 tons of CO2 a year. And that, of course, changes the local CO2 concentration. And so the question is, what are the health effects associated with those things? And it's not just because of power plants. This also happens in municipalities where you have very high traffic densities.
I was wondering, what is the life expectancy of a power plant like this? And also, in your opinion, when do you feel that natural gas power plants will be out?
The question was, how long should we expect the plant to live and or to operate what its useful life is? And
whether or not natural gas will continue to be a long-term viable fuel for making electricity. It's an excellent question. We do cover this in the report. These plants historically do not have a particularly long lifetime. So the subject that says, well, you know, these guys are going to be paying taxes, the facility in Manuka is already no longer paying taxes. And it's less than a decade old. And the reason has to do with, those of you who are accountants here will know this, that the power industry has been very good about getting a very powerful depreciation table on their assets. And so what happens is that all this equipment depreciates down to zero very, very rapidly. And because of the way tax asset base works, you wind up not doing that. So unless the village is able to establish an ad valorem tax, which is, where's our state representatives here, they need to probably work on that, then you're going to wind up with no tax capability. These plants, because of the variability in the marketplace, generally do not last longer than 20 years. You won't find one of these plants that's older than 20 years. And the typical strategy is to abandon it for this.
We have 3 hands raised, so we are running out of time. Once people leave, it's people going home to families. Let's try to go ahead and do that. The question was if any of us have any knowledge of the alternate sites of the power plant we have.
My question is, will the radionucleotides be stored in liquid fashion? If the radioactive
The question was, if they strip the groundwater in order to clean it of radionuclides, how do they actually store these radionuclides? And that's one of the issues today. It's a very significant problem. And it's how these radionuclides are effectively bound up. The best way to do it, of course, is to chemically bind them into solids so that they are not easily transported. Unfortunately, that's not usually how they do. They're usually collected in resin beds, and so they do tend to continue to be, there is the potential for migration if there's a release. And normally, that's not a problem. Where, you know, if you have a big full-time dam facility and they got 300 people working there, that's usually not a problem. It's where you have a facility, in particular a company like this that does not have radionuclide experience, that's usually where they get in trouble.
And will there be mercury emitted from these pumps?
Yeah.
Mercury part?
Yeah, there will be some mercury components. We are unable at the moment to quantify that until we get more detail from the developer on the specifics of some of the components.
We're losing people, so I really do want to close this out. We'll stay up here. If you guys have questions, please come up. I have one more topic that I think is pretty important. I'm going to say this on behalf of myself. I don't want to say that these guys agree with this necessarily, but we have an election on November 4th. Donna, could you confirm November 4th is the McHenry County Board of Elections? Is that true? November 4th? The McHenry County Board elections November 4th. This is coming from me personally. Register to vote if you're not registered to vote. And if you're going to go vote for one person, vote for whoever is running against Joe Godmuller. I'll make one more comment on that. I tell these guys,
Just an FYI, this election, if you're not registered to vote, if you have any young people, can register your sorry. Hi, I'm Mary McClellan. You can register to vote on the day of election. This election, it was passed by Springfield for the Democratic candidates, but why don't we utilize this? Anyone who's not registered to vote can go vote and register on November 4th. If you have any high school children, if they turn 18 before November 4th, they can vote. This is important. All of you, get everybody out there.
the order I want to make is directly over those residents. we're not gonna take sides. I don't think we should, so I hope we won't. Take sides in the elections for Oakwood Hills. But what we will do is support you if you're interested in running for a position in Oakwood Hills. There's 3 open. September 23rd, we will help you. Is it signatures? Is it signatures? Nomination ballots. I don't know a lot about this, I'll admit it. Chris Christensen here does. If you need help, are interested in running for a position in Oakwood Hills, we will help you, launch that. So September 23rd is the date if you're interested. It can't get any worse than this now. Thank you for coming. We're here.
Hey everyone, just real quick, as you guys heard from the radius, that this goes much further than the people around this area. You know people in Crystal Lake, you know people in Cary. Please spread the word. The support is going to get out there. You got to expand this far greater than they have right now.